Today, we recap a bizarre Subway series, and that wasn't very good for the Yankees, but very good for the Mets coming up. So I think, like most baseball fans, they expected the New York Yankees to respond a little bit better this Subway series because the last in City did not go well for them. Now, that was kind of like the beginning of this horrid stretch that is still continuing for the New York Yankees, but the Yankees uh, didn't get better. It was pretty brutal. Now, the first game was close, but the lineup, as we'll get to that soon, was the big complaint there. And the offense was the reason why they lost that game. It wasn't the pitching, it was the offense. They can't score. And the Mets did what was anticipated by most baseball fans and Yankee fans is they weren't going to pitch to Soto and Judge. And with Judge specifically, they pitched him in a big spot, but they basically, anytime Judge came up to bat, they would walk him or intentionally or unintentionally. Um, or pitching around him and all that stuff. So it was a kind of boring game. Boring is honestly pathetic was the second one, but boring the first one. Nothing really happened. Gleyber Torres was finally good. He finally woke up. We're seeing some bats from Gleyber Torres, but how do we not start here with the Yankees? Very concerning. I believe this is the first time they've lost all games versus the Mets in a season since 2013. I believe I have that correctly. That year, they did not make the playoffs. And this Yankee team has World Series expectations. And this Mets team, which we'll get to in the second half, negativity sells. So we must start with the New York Yankees, the team with Aaron Judge, who I've constantly repeated is I still think is the best player in baseball. Well, didn't really look like they pitched to him like he was the best player in baseball, but there were times, man, where Judge could have come up big in a big spot and it didn't happen. I'm not going to put all the blame on Aaron Judge. That would be silly. Yankee fans complaining about Aaron Judge need to dial it down a little bit. He's a big reason why they're in this spot. This is on Cashman and Aaron Boone. And I've been a Boone defender. So let's get right into the Boone and Cashman criticism. Cashman is the biggest problem here because if you just look at the roster, it's not that deep. Aaron Boone's trying to come up with lineups, lefty righties, to come in and do something, but he has nothing to work with. Like JD Davis should be DFA'd now. I don't know why he's still on the roster. Why is JD Davis still on the roster? This guy's terrible. And Mets fans will tell you from experience, but this guy was cut from the Oakland A's, who suck. So the big time New York Yankees are going to pick him up. Is this Cashman's ego? Like, no, we could take JD Davis. We can take him from the A's and make him into a very useful utility player. No, JD Davis stinks. He shouldn't be on the team. Okay. So that's number one. Jones leading off, whatever. He's had moments. He's hit well against lefties. I believe he bets over 300 versus lefties. So Jones leading off, you know, probably didn't bother me as much. I know a lot of Yankee fans were really bothered by that. To me, what does Boone really have to work with? I think at this point, with Stanton not in the lineup, with the fact they don't have bats, I think you got to put Soto in the leadoff spot and you got to put Judge at number two. You got to force pitchers to pitch to these guys because they're not getting pitched to, and it's really hurting the team. I was at the Yankee game Monday versus Tampa where they went off 9-1. So you can see the potential for explosive offense here, especially when Stanton comes back and you need a trade acquisition. You hope some guys bring it up, guys like Volpe, Verdugo, Glaber, if they start swinging the bat better. But they got to do something about first base now, which I thought was looking a little bit set with Ben Rice there. But clearly, Ben Rice is still young and in a slump at the moment. And DJ, he hit his first home. I witnessed history. I witnessed his first homer of the season. But he's just quite frankly a ground ball machine. He's batting 180, and DJ LeMahieu has been dreadful to watch. And the Yankees continue to not hit in scoring position. We've seen this year after year after year with the Mets, with the Yankees under Aaron Boone. This has just been the recipe where they show moments of extreme promise and extreme title contending powerhouse baseball. And then they have dreadful stretches where it looks like they're the worst team in baseball. Now, eventually they end up over 500. They end up squeaking into the playoffs. And I myself, I recognize this is a long season. I mean, just look at the Mets. So, were you judging the Mets? I mean, people have forgotten about May with the Mets. They've completely forgotten about it with the Mets and how they're playing right now. And right now, people have completely forgotten about the stretch the Yankees had at the beginning of the season. It's a long ass year. Now, with a long ass year, you get moments of poor baseball, mediocre baseball, great baseball. You see the whole thing. It's a big roller coaster. That's how long a 162 game season is. However, it just feels like the Yankees have these horrid, horrible stretches of baseball. And it just seems to be consistent under Aaron Boone as the manager. Now, I've been defending Boone for a while because I believe all these things under him have been mostly Cashman. Like, guys are just not hitting. And like, what's Aaron Boone supposed to do about that? But then you look at Carlos Mendoza for the Mets and look how was happening in May. Look at how they held people accountable. Jorge Lopez immediately does that glove thing. They cut him the next day. Now that's a mix of Stearns and him, but he did that. He's switching around the lineups, right? Lindor was struggling early on in the year. He was messing around with him. Jeff McNeil, same deal. Was brutal that first half of the season, holding him accountable, moving him towards the end of the lineup. Now you're getting a really good Jeff McNeil who knows he has to play better. Like, these are things that you don't see with Aaron Boone. And I'm going to be very honest with you. Like, those are just things you do not see. You see patting on the back, cheerleading. It's right there in front of us, which I've seen a montage video of him doing it. It feels, I think he did it like 8 times. You know, the one I remember famously is him slamming the table. Aaron Boone, I said this at the beginning of the year. I don't think he's a bad manager. Do I necessarily think he's a great manager? Not necessarily, but a good one. I thought he was okay. I thought the reason why the Yankees were losing was not because of him. But I don't know, man. You look at Alex Cora too. Like, Boston was supposed to be the last team in the division. They're competing for the second spot in the division. So, and they kind of exposed the Yankees. So he outmanaged Boone. So these are things to consider. Like, I don't think the Yankees have lost playoff series, playoff games, playoff whatever because of Aaron Boone necessarily. I don't think it's the reason they haven't won a World Series in the last 6 years. However, you look at this consistent pattern of dreadful baseball, especially during the summer, and it sucks. It's like, wow, like, can't you guys just be mediocre? Like, just okay during your poor stretches? I mean, you don't have to be the worst team and second worst team in baseball. I mean, God, please. Now, Cashman. Brian Cashman is obviously, his head is on a platter. This team has not won a World Series since 2009. This fan base is extremely impatient. They're told every single season that they're competing for a championship. Last year was immensely frustrating, and mostly because of him. I don't think anyone thinks differently that Cashman really failed fans last year with that roster that he decided to put out in 2023. It is 2024. He traded for Juan Soto. He signed Marcus Stroman, found guys like Luis Heel. Like, I liked what Cashman did over the summer. I wasn't really for going all in on Montgomery. He tried to get Yamamoto. Yamamoto was obviously in with the Dodgers. I had no issues really with Cashman. I liked the Verdugo trade. Really upgraded the outfield. I understood the decision because DJ played well at the end of last season. I understood the reasoning for bringing Rizzo, DJ LeMahieu, Gleyber Torres back. Gleyber's in a contract year. The hope is that he would play better, right? Obviously not going to get rid of Rodon. You signed into a big contract. The hope is Rodon would bounce back. Did early on in the year. Pitched really well on Monday, but for the last month has frankly been a disaster. So, and then the bullpen, you kind of figure it out from there. Like, obviously the bullpen's an issue in some ways for the Yankees. I don't think it's like a disastrous issue. At one point it was the biggest issue. Now it seems like they really just need guys who can hit. They need like 2 more bats. So now that the issues have been exposed, Brian Cashman has this trade deadline to get a bat or 2. Now, I would love 2 bats, but you got to at least get one guy who can shake this up. Now, I've been on the record. We talk about, Boone, Cashman all the time. Hal has allowed this to happen. Hal Steinbrenner has allowed this to happen. He's kept Cashman in forever. So you're blaming Boone, you're blaming Cashman, blaming people. Cashman's running things over there. Hal Steinbrenner's letting Cashman run things. So if you're going to blame Cashman for the same issues that seem to keep transpiring. Now, I don't think Brian Cashman is a bad GM, but it seems like you're running into these same issues. Sometimes good GMs can be fired too, or solid or somewhat mediocre guys who have just been there for too long. And that just could be the thing with Cashman. Now, I'm going to give him this year, but he's not going anywhere. So it's kind of like worthless talk. So you got to criticize Hal Steinbrenner. If we have another year of the Yankees, like there's no reason why the Yankees shouldn't be in the World Series this year. Look at the American League. Houston is obviously playing better. They're still the team I'm most afraid of, to be honest. But Houston isn't elite Houston. Seattle, Cleveland is overachieved. Kansas City's overachieved. Minnesota. Yankees always beat Minnesota. Baltimore hasn't won a playoff game and, quite frankly, have had a glorious opportunity, a golden opportunity to run away with this division. Quite frankly, they haven't. They just dropped 2 to the Marlins, one of the worst teams in the National League. So what does that tell you about Baltimore? And then, like, Boston, maybe, who was supposed to be last in the division. Like, there's no excuse for the Yankees to not make the World Series this year. Like, this is clearly a year. There's no dominant Houston Astro team. There's no dominant Boston Red Sox team. Like, this is the year. You got to make it happen. And because of that, we're going to get into some trade deadline acquisitions to think about. You got to be willing to give up prospects to get those guys. But I got to criticize the players too. Because, you blame Boone, Cashman. At some point, these players just got to play better. Like, Anthony Volpe at the beginning of the year was awesome. He's been bad. Now, lately, he's been okay. He's been bringing it up a little bit. But Volpe, I mean, the opportunity to hit with runners in scoring position the other day, like, he can't do it. And he's the ideal leadoff guy. If you're thinking of, the Yankees don't have a consistent leadoff guy, it looked like it was going to be him, and that was the ideal goal. The ideal goal is that Volpe leads off. But he's been so bad since May. Like, what do you do with him? You got to move him back down. Gleyber Torres. What the hell? Like, last year was great. The year before that was good. I mean, you're playing as bad as you did back in 22. Sorry, not 22, 21. So, Gleyber Torres, he's been better of recently. He obviously hit the homer yesterday and the homer the other day. Gleyber Torres, just to me, I could just see it. Can't you just see it? Can't you just see the critical error he makes in a critical playoff game in a big spot? Like, when the Yankees need him most, can't you just see it? I'd like to believe that the guy on the baseball card shows up. Like, Gleyber Torres, you can't find many second basemen better than Gleyber Torres. However, what he's giving you this year, you can find someone that can at least just make a play in the field consistently. If you're not going to hit. Now, I don't think Gleyber Torres gets traded, personally. I don't. Unless, we'll see what happens with this Jazz Chisholm thing. We'll get into players that the Yankees can go after. But, I mean, for God's sakes, Gleyber Torres has been so underwhelming this year. And I'm glad to see he's finally somewhat hitting the ball better. But you saw Marcus Stroman the other day. I didn't blame Marcus Stroman whatsoever that time where he showed up Gleyber Torres. I don't blame him whatsoever. How do you blame Marcus Stroman for that? And there's a lot of people like, oh, that's not, got to keep your emotions in check. No, this team was playing like crap, and they needed a juice. And what happened? The Yankees dominated after that. So, if anything, this team needs a little bit more riled up. They should use that as an example, maybe. Like, hey, just a little kick in the ass and have some things going. I mean, for God's sakes, this team just is looking a lot like last year's team, and you just traded for Juan Soto, who's playing like a top 5 player in baseball. So, I get he went 0 for 4 the other day. you know, just if you look at the Yankees roster, and this is where we go back to Cashman, because we look at the Yankee team in May, look at the Mets now, and look at the Yankee team now, and look at the Mets in May. Yankee fans in May acted like they were so much better than the Mets. Let's be real. The Mets, if you look at each position, other than Judge and Soto, which, Starling Marte, Tyrone Taylor plays the outfield every once in a while. You got Bader in the outfield. Solid players. Tyrone Taylor has shown to be a nice addition to this Mets team. And Marte was hitting really well. Now, he wasn't feeling really well, but those are like solid players. Like Bader's have given you a great year for the Mets, and he was the starting center fielder for the Yankees last year. Left field, Alex Verdugo or Brandon Nimmo? You'd rather have Brandon Nimmo, for sure. Third base, DJ LeMahieu or Mark Vientos? Not even a contest. Mark Vientos. Lindor, Volpe. Obviously Lindor. Jeff McNeil and Gleyber Torres and, Iglesias kind of cancel out probably, but Gleyber's not having a good year. And the way McNeil's playing lately and the way the vibes Iglesias is bringing for the Mets, I mean, I'd take that over Gleyber Torres, honestly. And then first base, Rizzo, Ben Rice, that combination, or Pete Alonso. It's obviously Pete Alonso. Catcher, Austin Wells, Jose Trevino combo, or Francisco Alvarez. I mean, come on. Look at every single position. It's kind of why we'll get to the Mets later, why the Mets were just so frustrating. It's like, why aren't you guys better? Like, you guys got good players on this team. The Yankees are not that much better than the Mets as far as position-wise. It's a credit to Aaron Judge and Juan Soto to what they've done. But the Yankees need to add electric bats of some kind in the trade deadline. That is the biggest issue with this team. Now, starting pitching, they've allowed a ton of home runs. I believe they've added the most home runs. I think they've allowed the most home runs, I think, in the last month out of any team in baseball. Like, that's crazy. But to be honest, I look at the starting pitching. I'm not really concerned about Cole. I'm not really too worried about Cole. I know he sucked yesterday. I know he sucked in both games versus the Mets. I've been fine with what I've seen. I think he's going to improve as the year goes on. Monday start for Modon was nice to see. Hopefully he can continue that. Sometimes pitchers just have bad months. Clark Schmidt, we'll see when he comes back. Nestor, we'll see if he's on the move at the deadline. I think that's very possible. We've seen Cashman do this with Jordan Montgomery. I like Marcus Stroman. Hopefully he stays healthy. And Luis Heel. Luis Heel seems to have calmed down a bit since his, outburst of bad play. I think these are things, and the bullpen is a concern. I think it's anticipated the Yankees will get more bullpen help. The Yankees bullpen is an issue. Clay Holmes has blown saves all over the place. We've seen this with Clay Holmes. He looks unhittable at times, and then he has moments where he's not. It happens. I think he should have made the All-Star team. Not necessarily. I mean, the guy has blown games all over the place. And that Baltimore game was just brutal. It's not all on him. It's on Volpe. It's on Verdugo as well. I mean, that's just garbage. I don't trust Clay Holmes. But you know what? I don't trust a lot of closers, if I'm being real. Now, if you're able to get some elite closer, if you have the opportunity to do that, fine. I don't think you're finding that, though, unless you get Miller from Oakland. I mean, I don't really see that. And they probably want something really big for him, I would assume. So I don't really, and considering that I think the Yankees really just need bats more, I think they definitely need more bats. And I think that's the real need for this team, is an infielder that can hit. And if you can get another bat, great. But that's what you're looking at from a Yankees perspective. As far as, as far as needs go, the bullpen is obviously a concern, but I don't think anybody's really sold with their bullpen, to be honest, and even their closing pitcher. I don't think I really see that. And if Clay Holmes is going to struggle in the summer and be fine in October, okay. I mean, he kind of did this in 22 as well. He started the year off great, made an all-star team, was shaky towards the end of the year. Did they lose games because of Clay Holmes in the playoffs? No. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Now they also have Wandy Peralta. Be nice to have him back, but these are things that the Yankees are gonna have to figure out. I really like Weaver. He's by far my favorite bullpen arm for sure for the Yankees. But let's talk about they need to be willing to part with prospects, but let's talk about some additions that the Yankees could possibly look at here. I got this from a New York Times article, just some things. Ryan McMahon with Colorado has been talked about forever, but it seems like that's kind of slowing down. Isaac Paredes from the Tampa Bay Rays. We'll see what he does. If he commands anything on the market for the Yankees. There's been reports that the Yankees and Rays have been talking. The Rays have been looking at their prospects. The Rays are looking to sell. They know this year is not going to be it. They're not better than the Red Sox. They're not better than the Yankees. They're not better than as bad as the Yankees have played, and they're not better than Baltimore. And it's just, I think they see that the writing's on the wall, even though they're not a god awful team. We'll see. Toronto, we'll see what happens with them. We'll see if they start selling off pieces. They've been a disaster. I've never been a fan of that team personally. Like, just every year I got to hear about how talented they are, and they never seem to do anything. So Toronto's been a disaster. This Chaz Chisholm report is interesting to me. I think it's stupid. This whole report that Yankees are concerned his personality wouldn't fit. It's like, you got Marcus Stroman and Alex Verdugo in this locker room with Juan Soto. Like, why wouldn't Chaz Chisholm fit? Would he would run, I think he would play better than Gleyber Torres and giving Gleyber Torres mopes all the time. I mean, why are we so concerned about that? That's such a pretentious thing. It's like, he's good. That shouldn't stop you from acquiring him, especially since he's somebody that can totally add electricity to your team. So that was weird to me. Other names that have been discussed: Jonathan India from the Reds. We'll see. I mean, we'll see if they part ways with him. Been disappointed in the Reds for sure, but we'll see. If that's an option for them. Jack Flaherty. We'll see if that's an option if they want to add another starter. I personally believe the starters are okay. I don't think they like desperately need another starter, especially because you saw how Texas won last year, where they didn't necessarily win because of their starting pitching. Like, they got hot starting pitching at the end. Don't get me wrong, and guys played crucial roles here, but it's hard to predict if they're going to be ready for that moment. Like, to me, the Yankees need to hit. It's been the consistent thing with the Yankees is they haven't been able to hit in the playoffs, and they need guys who can hit, and they need guys like Verdugo and Volpe to step up. And if you're going to keep Gleyber, I think it's risky. I'll understand it, but, and he made a nice play yesterday. I saw it. Gleyber Torres is easily the most divisive Yankee right now. Either that or DJ LeMahieu. I mean, I don't think anybody really likes DJ LeMahieu at this point right now, what he's giving you. I mean, if you're going to use DJ as a utility, that's fine. Cabrera is already there as a utility. I like Cabrera, but limited in what he can do. I just think the Yankees need to add another bat or two. Hopefully, as disastrous as this has been, the Yankees can still ride hot here. It's important to remember it's a 162 game season. It feels like we've seen this movie over and over again with this team. But I think you're in a different American League. And I think the Yankees, if they can add a bat or two, get some help in the bullpen, and kind of and get Stanton back in, and then you're obviously hoping Verdugo and Volpe and Gleyber play up to their capabilities. I say a bat or two, like I'm looking at first base. It depends on if they're getting rid of Gleyber Torres or Anthony Rizzo or Ben Rice. Either one of those. They need guys who can hit in those positions. And you got to be willing to give up prospects. Spencer Jones is the hottest prospect. They weren't able to, they didn't want to give him up for Corbin Burns. Didn't want to give him up for Dylan Cease. You might have to give him up Because if your whole thing is we don't want to give him up just in case Soto leaves, to me, Soto leaving is a is something that just can't happen anyway if you're the New York Yankees. You got to be all and willing to pay him. And that's a good transition to the for the Mets because a lot of Mets fans were at Yankee Stadium. Okay. And the Mets dominated the Yankees this year. You don't think Soto is at least going to consider the Mets with that paycheck, Steve Cohen? If the Mets, who are a sneaky playoff team this year, and we'll get into that, the New York Mets, if you add Juan Soto in right field, add maybe a couple more bullpen help starters, and you get like a better Diaz, maybe. I mean, the Mets are cooking at that point. I mean, don't act like that's not entirely possible. Now, I don't think the Yankees will let him go, but would it shock me? Not necessarily. If I'm being real. And what's the backup plan after that? I'm just saying if you're going to try and sell on Dominguez and Spencer Jones and all that, that's ridiculous. You got to make sure Juan Soto's in pinstripes for the next 15 years. You got to do that. You got Judge and Cole. You got to capitalize on this window. You have not won in 15 years. This is a year you got to win. Letting Soto go is Yankee fans would lose it on how. Now, I don't think he'll do it, but that would be crazy because the Mets right now are cooking. And this is something I didn't even expect. And as if anybody who's followed me has known that I have been very pro Mets all season. And that's why I was very frustrated with them in May because I looked at the team and I'm like, why is this team playing so bad? Why is this team 11 games under 500? Like, they got good players. Like, it makes no sense. I liked what David Stearns did in the offseason. He deserves his flowers. Mendoza wasn't doing anything that was like, oh my God, this manager stinks and all that stuff, right? And Mets fans were extremely impatient. Listen, they were sold a bill of goods a couple years ago with Steve Cohen. I get it. You know, you finally got an owner who could spend. You spent money. You got Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. By the way, look at Max Scherzer in Texas. What's Texas doing right now? Look at Justin Verlander with Houston. I understand Houston's, been better, and obviously they took back, the division. But this is something to think about here because they made the right moves at the deadline last year in selling off players. And I know some Mets fans were not happy with getting rid of Justin Verlander. But, I expected them to be contending for that third wildcard spot. I did not think they would get in. I thought they would be the last team or the first team out of those three wildcard spots. However, right now they sit in a wildcard spot pretty comfortably. And right now they are on a roll and they're going to get Kodai Senga soon, which is only going to help their starting pitching. To me, they just need bullpen help. Starling Marte, he's supposed to come back eventually. So if he can give you another bat there, that's great. If you look at how the Mets are playing with Nimmo, Lindor is giving you like an MVP caliber second half of the season after his horrendous start. And it's a disgrace he didn't make the All-Star team. It's a disgrace. How does Francisco Lindor not make the All-Star team? This guy's been kicking ass basically ever since May and ever since he's been moved to the leadoff spot. And you got to give credit to Stearns and Mendoza. I mean, I looked at the Mets this year similar to what the New York Giants did when they brought in Joe Shane and Brian Dable, bringing in a new coach, bringing in a new, president of baseball operations. Uh, Clearly the plan was to see what you had this year with these guys. Like, let's get these fringe players that should be able to help this core group, and let's see how they respond. Let's add another cleanup hitter. Let's add a better cleanup hitter than Daniel Vogelbach and JD Martinez, who's having a great year for the Mets this year. And let's take a flyer out on some pitchers like Luis Severino, Manaea. Let's take a look let's add another outfielder and Harrison Bader. Comfortable in playing in New York. All these things. And let's see what this group of Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Nimmo, let's see what they can do. Alvarez, and it's clear a very valuable part of this team is Francisco Alvarez because they were so bad when he was out and they were good when he was playing. And the New York Mets are in a really good position as an organization right now because now they're building their farm system. They have good players on the team. They're winning baseball games. They have this great fun team right now with the oh my God and all that stuff and Grimace and all that. The Mets are in a good spot. They need more bullpen help. Diaz is getting his confidence back. That's nice to see. I really don't know why Adam Ottavino is still on this team. I think he'll be gone eventually because it's like, he stinks. I mean, come on. Jake Diekman, the fact that he struck out Aaron Judge the other day made me sick. But, he's been the worst reliever in baseball basically in the last month. The Mets need bullpen help, no doubt. Um, their recent trade with the Rays seems to be a good one so far. Nunez is giving you something. I think that's good too. But the Mets, obviously you don't want to give up any major pieces or prospects. But if you can add bullpen help at the deadline, I think you can possibly capture lightning in a bottle with this Mets team right now because the vibes are great. They're getting hot. And it leads to the Pete Alonso question because a lot of Mets fans have been more upset with Pete Alonso than beginning of the year. You've seen a tide towards maybe being open with letting him walk or trading him. Here's the thing. I wouldn't trade Pete Alonso. I wouldn't trade him. I don't think you're going to get as much for him at the deadline as you may think. And I don't think you should mess with the good thing right now. And I think Pete Alonso can only help you at this point with his offense. I don't think, and he made a really great grab the other day defensively. And I think it was Nunez just dropped the ball. So I've obviously Pete Alonso was an all-star this year, but it was kind of like phony because, they probably just wanted him in the home run derby. I don't think Pete Alonso is going to get the money that he wants from a team in the offseason. And I think that bodes well for the Mets. And I think the Mets should ride it out with Pete. And I know these decisions are tough, but the way the Mets are playing, and he had a 2-run homer yesterday. The way the Mets are playing, I don't think Pete Alonso hurts that. And because if you're going to get rid of him, then you got a hole at first base. I guess you can move Vientos, bring up Beatty, but Beatty, you're going to rely on Beatty in a playoff game. Ride it out with Pete, negotiate in the summer. And I don't think, unless they get some crazy haul, which I don't think they're going to get, Pete Alonso is safe as a Met for now. Nothing shocks me anymore, but I just wouldn't trade Pete Alonso unless I was completely blown away by an offer. It's like, I can't refuse this offer. Where is that though? The time if you were going to trade Pete Alonso was either in the offseason or last trade deadline. And if the Mets were stinking up the joint, then it would make sense to trade Pete Alonso at the deadline. But they're not stinking up the joint. They're playing really hot baseball. They look like a legitimate, really good team. And say what you want about Pete Alonso, he's a part of that. And to me, losing his bat would only hurt. I know he's not having the greatest year, but I think he'll settle in nicely post-trade deadline when he's not in rumors. And he can just focus on playing for the Mets right now and making the postseason. I think that's what they got to do here with Pete Alonso. But David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, and Steve Cohen deserve credit because, listen, they went for it. Steve Cohen specifically went for it. It failed with Max Scherzer, Verlander. Last year's team was really bad. They went in with Buck. Buck was manager of the year in 22. It really didn't make sense to why the Mets were so bad last year. But they were, and they had to move on. They brought in Stearns, who I liked. People were red hot on him at the beginning, saying like, this guy's an analytical guy, whatever. Didn't make any huge moves. They didn't give $1 million to Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, which would have been a mistake. I think it would have been a massive mistake if they did that. And they went on for Yamamoto. I believe they were the highest bidder, or at least matched the bid with the Dodgers for Yamamoto. Fine. Ohtani wasn't an option. So if you're the Mets, let's sign fringe outfielders. I kind of liked the bullpen additions before the season. Clearly it's still an issue. So, I was wrong about that, but I think it's still something fixable. And you look at the starting arms that they brought in, and it's like, yeah, they lost Scherzer and Verlander. They're pitching better now than they did last year when they were supposed to pitch well. I mean, the starting pitching last year was a joke at times. This year, it's been pretty good. It's not their strongest element of a team, but they got bats and they're hitting, and that's really good to see. And I think David Stearns deserves credit. Mendoza deserves credit for holding guys accountable. Stearns also deserves credit for that. As soon as there was drama with Jorge Lopez, you same old Mets, that whole thing, they cut him. And then the Mets started to win. That mindset helps. And I think it's starting a new culture for the Mets. And I was very pro Stearns and Mendoza at the time for holding Jorge Lopez accountable, as embarrassing as that was. And Mets fans were really impatient. They expected nothing from this group. I'm not a Met fan, but I saw the potential of possibly having a season this year. And now it looks like you Mets fans may be in store for more than a season this year. Like this team looks good at this moment. And the opportunity to add Soto at the end of the year is as realistic as ever, which kills me as a Yankee fan, and I've said enough about that. But it's really just that. But let's talk about the Mets and how the outlook is in the National League. We'll see what they do at the deadline. Like I said before, I think it's really just bullpen help they need to add. Everything else seems to be fine. Let's talk about the National League. It's the Philadelphia Phillies, and that's it. The Dodgers, maybe? Okay. I was a little rude to the Dodgers. Dodger fans are going to kill me. I hate Dodger fans, can't stand them. If you look up my Shohei Ohtani post on my Instagram, Dodger fans, they could be very insufferable. I was at the Yankee Dodger series. Dodger fans just have this massive ego. So obviously, it's going to be the Dodgers. It's going to be the Phillies. Have the Braves won in the postseason? Not really. I mean, obviously they won the World Series a couple years back, but recently, if you're looking at it, the Braves have disappointed in the postseason. The Phillies, they are probably the favorite. Not probably, definitely the favorite. But they also lost in the playoffs last year when everyone thought they were going to go. And they also lost on their way to the World Series. And the Diamondbacks were there and they barely made it. And they were able to take out the Phillies. And if you got your bats going good, I mean, I'm not going to pick the Mets to win the World Series or go to the World Series. But if you can get hot at the right time and your starting pitching is good enough and you can just find a way to move around your bullpen as much as you can or improve it a little bit, you kind of don't know what's going to happen. And that's the hope for Mets fans, which is why I wouldn't trade Pete Alonso. The Dodgers have to prove that they can win in the postseason. And with Ohtani, Yamamoto, it'll be different, most likely. But it's something to consider. If you're a Met fan, it's like, okay, those two teams in the National League, they're not dominant, we're in the World Series every year teams. Why can't the Mets make a run? Why can't they? I'm not betting on it. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying they're the favorites to do anything. You're playing with house money. People didn't think you'd be here in May. And now you're in a situation where maybe you could surprise some people. I mean, you really scared of the Milwaukee Brewers? I mean, come on. What are we talking about here? So they're going to be a wild card team. They got to win that because they weren't able to win that in 22. So you're playing with house money. You got a passionate fan base that's love. You got the vibes. You got bats. If Diaz is able to get to a level of consistency and be somewhat that player he was a couple years ago, you got a closer. If you can add some parts of the bullpen, that's nice too. I think you got a good manager here too. So I think you got a fantastic manager personally with Mendoza. And think about Craig Counsell, who everybody thought the Mets were going to get. Look at the Cubs. I mean, crazy. It shows like you got to play the games. You got to see how things unfold. And I know with Mets fans, it's hard because you've been disappointed over and over and over and over again. Like, why should we expect anything from this organization? Well, you look around, you got a smart general manager. You got an owner that's willing to spend and clearly cares about the team. and you got talent on the team. And if you get behind that, I mean, they got great fans there in Queens. So the Mets have become a sneaky good team, and I think you shouldn't rule them out for possibly doing something in the postseason. I just don't think you can. But the Subway Series was obviously very disappointing from a Yankee fan perspective, as I am. And the Yankees are going to have to make moves. And the Mets have established themselves as a team that's like, hey, we're more than just a good story. I think we can be something better than that. I think that's what you're seeing from them. So that's the recap of the Subway Series. Obviously, I haven't talked about movies in a while, but just a little light thing. I've been watching a lot of Tubi lately, and Tubi is a streaming service that it's free, and it's something that you're seeing with these streaming services. I called this a couple years ago, like when streaming service had to be used and relied upon during the pandemic. It became a thing where it was like, okay, what are we going to do with movie theaters? We can't see movies in theaters anymore, so let's put everything on streaming services, and that was needed. But what was going to be the plan after that? Because then all these channels tried to start their own streaming services, and now a lot of them really aren't making money, except Netflix. So you get this situation where like people are like, okay, I'm sick of paying for all these different streaming services like Peacock and Max and Tubi outstreamed all those Disney Plus, Max, Peacock, Apple TV, like all these streaming services, it's really like they've been outstreamed by this free streaming service that reminds you of Blockbuster in regards to the titles that they have and the old school titles they have and all that. And I've been really enjoying it. They got some good stuff on there. They have a lot of crap on there, but it's cool to like kind of see like this video store like catalog that they have there. And it's free. And so I've been watching a lot of Tubi lately. Definitely recommend it if you haven't. Checked it out if you want to watch entertainment for free that has some good quality stuff on there. Um, let's talk about Deadpool Wolverine. It is releasing this weekend. I have not seen the movie, but I will, and I will have a discussion on that, and I will go into this more. But I'm seeing some hate for Deadpool Wolverine, and I'm seeing some well-regarded critics that I respect. I'm seeing what they're saying about Deadpool and Wolverine. And I am in a position where I can't really speak on it too much because I haven't seen the movie. But the criticisms I'm seeing are more, oh, it's a bloated cameo nitpicky movie. Like it's not good for that reason. And I just want to say Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home, you're seeing this collective fan base, not fan base, this collective group of people that are saying, oh, those movies suck. As the days go by, saying, oh, those movies suck because of this nitpick or this cameo, or they just relied on cameos and fan service and blah, blah, blah. I agree that fan service can be cheap. However, it's becoming a little cheap now, the criticism of fan service. I think that is becoming more cheap. Because if you're saying, oh, Spider-Man No Way Home was bad, and the only reason why people like it is because of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, well, those are pretty big things. And they handle that really well. So I will never say that movie's bad in whatsoever. I had so much fun. It's one of my favorite theater experiences at the time. And I'm not somebody who's this fanboy, person all the time who says like, "Oh, I love this because of that and that," just these characters from my childhood. I enjoyed the movie. Avengers Endgame. It's like, oh, the time travel nitpicking is boring up until the end, basically. Like, what? There's elements to the opening two acts that are funny and entertaining. And yeah, it's maybe not be perfect. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie. I mean, you got to get real here. So I haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine. I understand people were annoyed at the cameos in The Flash last year, so people are kind of annoyed at this fan service bait. But I'm assuming it's going to be Deadpool, Wolverine, two characters that I love with jokes. Why can't it just be that? It's like, oh, they're relying on Hugh Jackman is well, Hugh Jackman's great as Wolverine. Do you want them to cast someone else as Wolverine? I think we're running into this thing with Marvel now where we're failing to enjoy any movie they release. And I think that's unfair to Marvel. And I've been very critical of Marvel and what they've done. But Deadpool Wolverine is not the movie I think I'm going to be very critical of it. Now, listen, I haven't seen it, so maybe it is a bloated mess and blah blah blah. But the criticisms that I've seen for Deadpool Wolverine sound very familiar and similar to the people who were critical of No Way Home and Endgame, where it's fan service, fan service, fan service, fan service. Well, that's a little cheap to me personally. And I can't wait to see the film. It's my most anticipated film of the year, and I can't wait to see it. And I'll have a discussion on that. I'll also have a discussion on Twisters and some other movie talk because I need to start talking again about film on this channel. Thank you guys for listening today. It's Subway Series. Hopefully the Yankees continue to not depress me, and the trade deadline is coming up, and I plan on talking about that from the Yankees perspective and Mets perspective and other moves around Major League Baseball. But that's going to be it for the JB podcast today. I'll see you guys next time.